Hello, my name is Alex, and I produce content for the Circuit Bending Fool YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to walk you through the steps of how I circuit bent an interactive baby toy. Like many of these baby doll toys, they come loaded with batteries, have no power switch, and you simply activate the samples by touching connections in the arms, the legs, or putting a pacifier in the mouth. Check it out. With the doll lying on its face, dig into its back and pull out the plastic housing that accesses the circuit board that we're going to modify for this project. Use a small screwdriver to remove the two Phillips head screws that secure the lid to the base of this two-piece plastic housing. In addition to the screws, there are some friction nubs on the side that you'll have to navigate to separate the box into two separate pieces. On the inside, we can see there is an internal speaker that connects to the circuit board, and there is 3 button cell batteries that connect to the circuit as well. We're going to want to remove the 2 screws that keep the tray holding these batteries that are attached to the circuit. Go ahead and use the same screwdriver to loosen these screws and remove the battery tray. We are going to be using a separate 3 AA battery pack in this build, so we're not going to need to keep these batteries or these screws. Next up, we need to prepare 4 wires for installing an output and a potentiometer. You're going to need to use a wire stripping tool to clip a little bit of the insulation off the end of each of these wires. I'm using a helping hands tool to help me prepare the wires and attach them to the output. Use a hot soldering iron to heat up the metal connections on the output and melt solder on them. Take your time and be sure to coat them well with a good amount of solder. Prepare both of the exposed wires with a little bit of solder before heating them up again to attach onto each of the connections of the output. Again, heat up the metal and then attach the connection through the liquid solder. It's important that you keep these surfaces clean so that you can make very good soldering connections. Always make sure that each connection is strong before moving on to the next one. Now that we have our wires connected up for our output, we can move on to the potentiometer. You're going to want to attach some solder to all 3 lugs of this 1K potentiometer. You're also going to tin 2 wires and connect the first wire to the center lug on the potentiometer. You can connect the second wire to either one of the outer lugs because we're going to use a jumper wire to connect both of those outer lugs together. The jumper wire is a design choice I made that's going to give the potentiometer more playability when the toy's all put together. To add a jumper wire, you're going to use a small piece of scrap wire, cut off the insulation off both ends, tin it, and then attach the outer wire all the way across to the outer wire on the other side of the pot. Although I am using a helping hand tool, it is convenient to have a pair of pliers to help me finish the job. And you're going to need them because potentiometers, when you purchase them, usually arrive with a little metal nub that's on the side of it that they use to slot into a panel. We're not going to need it, so use that pair of pliers to just clip it off. Here we have both of the components that we're going to install inside the baby doll's head. A 1/4 inch output with 2 wires and a 1K potentiometer with 2 wires and a jumper cable joining the 2 outer lugs. I want to install these components inside the head of the baby doll. So what we're going to need to do is remove it. The head is attached to the body and the clothes of the doll with a zip tie. So you're going to want a flush cutting set of pliers to snap that zip tie, and the baby head just falls right off. There's plenty of space inside this head to install the components wherever you want. After deciding on a layout, I mark the spots and then drill the holes. Take your time and make sure that you get a tight fit on both of these components. Now be sure to remove the nut and washer on these components before installing them. So the next task may take a little bit of finesse. You're going to want to thread these components down through the neck of this head and find a way to navigate them through the holes that you made. In my case, I ended up using a large carpenter's pencil to hold the output in place so that I could put the washer and then thread the nut on there. Finally, secure it with a wrench. Same thing with the potentiometer. Find a way to get the head of the potentiometer through the hole and then maybe pull it through with some pliers or something. Find a way to stabilize it from the back so you can install the washer and the nut, and then finally tighten it up with a wrench. After you've secured these components in the head, you're going to want to find a way to thread those 4 wires into the body of the toy. So simply take a pair of pliers or any blunt tool and just poke a hole through the shirt in the back and then thread the wires through. You're going to need a new zip tie to reattach the head to the body. Thread the new zip tie all the way around the hem in the body and then reattach the body to the plastic head. To make our modifications, we're going to need access to the inside of this case. Luckily, we can just remove the battery tray from the back with a small screwdriver and we're all set. As you can see, we have 4 wires coming from the components that we installed in the head. The 2 white wires are going to be connected to the speaker connections that are on the circuit board. Run these wires through the hole in the bottom of the case. Go ahead and measure, cut, and tin both of these wires. Gently heat the contact where the first speaker wire is located on the board and attach the new wire there. Do the same for the second speaker wire. Make sure you don't lose any of the connections of the original speaker wires. And you may need to spread these wires out inside the case so that we can make our next solder connection. Use your soldering iron to melt a little bit of solder on both the negative and the positive connections of the circuit board. Take one of the wires coming from the potentiometer, thread it through the back of the casing, cut a little bit of the insulation off the tip, tin it with a soldering iron, and then attach it to the negative connection on the circuit board. Use this same technique with a new wire to make the positive connection on the circuit board. Okay, now we have everything installed inside the case that has the internal speaker and the circuit board. Make sure everything looks organized before you snap the bottom and the lid back together. So the last task will be hooking up the power to an external battery pack. We need to connect the remaining black wire coming from the potentiometer we installed to the negative of the battery pack, and the red positive wire coming from the circuit box to the positive connection of the battery pack. This is going to allow us to use the potentiometer to control the amount of power being sent through this connection. We need to cut off a little bit of insulation and attach these wires together. In this case, I'm using 2 small pieces of heat shrink tubing to replace the insulation when we join the 2 wires together. Thread your positive wire from the circuit board to the positive wire on the battery pack. Do the same for the negative wires. Use a soldering iron to melt a good amount of solder to join these wires together. Cover the connection with the shrink wrap tubing and use a disposable lighter to heat up the tubing so it shrinks around the connection. All right, so the last step is to take the circuit box housing and the external battery pack and stuff them back inside the toy. And now, after circuit bending, I think this baby doll is ready for its debut performance.
Mama, 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 mama.